I died at 30 in a hospital room, bleeding out from pregnancy complications while my husband stood in the hallway with her. His white moonlight, the woman he'd loved before me, the woman he'd never stopped comparing me to. Through the door I could hear them talking. "I should have married you, Celeste," my husband Daniel said. "I settled for Elena because you weren't available. But you were always the one." "I know," Celeste replied, her voice soft and sweet. "But I'm here now. Once she's gone, we can finally be together. My name is Elena Martinez, and I died knowing my husband had never loved me. I died carrying his child. A child he didn't even know existed because he'd been too busy chasing the ghost of his perfect first love. I died alone while he stood 30 feet away, planning his future with another woman. The last thing I saw was the nurse's pitying face. The last thing I felt was the baby moving inside me, fighting to live while I was dying. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was 25 years old, standing in a bridal shop, wearing a wedding dress, staring at my reflection in the mirror. "You look beautiful," my mother said, crying happy tears. "Daniel is so lucky to have you." I stared at myself, young, hopeful, stupidly in love with a man who would spend the next 5 years making me feel like I wasn't enough. This was 6 months before my wedding to Daniel. 6 months before I'd make the biggest mistake of my life. But this time I had knowledge. I had lived through 5 years of marriage where Daniel compared me to Celeste at every turn, where he kept her photos hidden in his study, where he'd say her name in his sleep, where he'd cancel our anniversary to attend her art gallery openings. Celeste, his white moonlight, the luminous first love he'd put on a pedestal so high that no real woman could ever compete. In my previous timeline, I tried everything to make him love me. I changed my appearance to look more like her. I'd taken up painting because she was an artist. I'd even befriended her, hoping that knowing her would help me understand what Daniel loved so much. Instead, it had just made everything worse. Celeste had been sweet on the surface but subtly cruel underneath, always mentioning things Daniel had told her about our problems, always showing up at our important moments, always reminding me that she knew him better than I ever would. And I died listening to them plan their future over my dying body. "Not this time. I'm not getting married," I said. My mother's tears stopped instantly. "What? I'm not marrying Daniel. Elena, you're just nervous. Wedding jitters are normal." "It's not jitters, Mom. It's clarity." I started unzipping the dress. "I don't love him. Not the way I should. And he doesn't love me either." "That's ridiculous. Daniel adores you. Daniel adores someone else. He's settling for me. And I'm not going to spend my life being someone's second choice." My mother looked shocked, but I didn't care. I'd spent 5 years trying to be enough for Daniel. This time I was choosing myself. I changed back into my regular clothes and left the bridal shop. My phone buzzed immediately, Daniel calling. I let it ring. Over the next week, Daniel tried everything. Flowers, letters, showing up at my apartment. I refused to see him. Finally, he ambushed me at my office. "Elena, what the hell is going on?" He looked genuinely confused and hurt. "We're supposed to get married in 5 months. You won't return my calls, you're avoiding me." "I'm ending our engagement," I said calmly. "Why?" "Because you're in love with someone else." Daniel's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Celeste," I interrupted. "Your white moonlight. Your first love. The woman you compare me to constantly. I've never compared you to her. You have. Maybe not out loud, but in every way that matters. The way you look at her photos when you think I'm not watching. The way you light up when she texts. The way you've kept her at the center of your life for years." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it, because he knew I was right. "You should marry her," I continued. "She's the one you really want. I'm just the safe choice, the practical one, the one who was actually available." "Elena, that's not fair. I do love you. You love the idea of me. You love that I'm stable and supportive and don't demand too much. But you're not in love with me. You've never been in love with me. What do you want me to do?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking. "Celeste is engaged to someone else. She's getting married next month." "Then stop her," I said simply. "If you love her as much as I think you do, go tell her. Fight for her. Don't settle for me when your heart belongs to someone else." "I can't just." "Yes, you can. And you should. Because I deserve better than being someone's second choice, and honestly, so does she. I handed him back the engagement ring. Be with the person you really love, Daniel. Life's too short to settle. I walked away, and this time I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that Daniel had confessed his feelings to Celeste. That she'd broken off her engagement. That they were together now, planning their own wedding. I felt nothing but relief. 1 month after leaving Daniel, I discovered I was pregnant. I stared at the positive test in shock. We'd slept together one last time about 2 weeks before I'd ended things. I'd thought we'd been careful, but apparently not careful enough. I sat in my bathroom for an hour, thinking about my options. In my previous timeline, I died carrying Daniel's baby. He'd never known it existed. Never mourned it. Never even realized what he'd lost. This time I had a choice. I could tell him, trap him into a relationship he didn't want, make him resent me and the baby, watch him long for Celeste while raising our child. Or I could walk away completely. Keep the baby secret. Raise it alone. Let Daniel have his perfect life with his perfect woman while I built something real on my own. The choice was obvious. I didn't tell him. Instead, I requested a transfer to my company's Seattle office, 3,000 miles from Daniel and Celeste and the life I'd almost settled for. My manager approved immediately. I was good at my job, and they'd been wanting someone to oversee the West Coast expansion. 2 months later, I was living in Seattle, working at a new office, hiding my growing pregnancy under loose clothes and strategic camera angles during video calls. I didn't know anyone in Seattle. I had no support system. I was pregnant and alone and should have been terrified. Instead, I felt free. I was 7 months pregnant when I met Marcus Chun. He was a pediatrician at the hospital where I'd gone for a checkup. I'd been having some concerning symptoms, high blood pressure, swelling, and my regular doctor had referred me to a specialist. Marcus was the on-call doctor who examined me. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," he said, his voice calm but serious. "I'm concerned about preeclampsia. Have you been under a lot of stress?" "Just the normal stress of being pregnant and alone," I said, trying to make it sound lighter than it was. Marcus looked at me carefully. "Alone? No partner, no family nearby. Fresh start in a new city. That's brave." "Or stupid," I admitted. "Brave," Marcus repeated firmly. "But you need to take this seriously. Preeclampsia can be dangerous for both you and the baby. I'm going to want to see you weekly. Maybe more depending on how things progress." Over the next few weeks, Marcus became something unexpected. A friend. He checked on me between appointments. He made sure I was following his instructions. He even brought me food once when I mentioned I'd been too tired to cook. "You don't have to do this," I told him. "I'm just a patient." "You're a person," Marcus corrected. "And you're alone in a new city, pregnant, dealing with a potentially serious complication. Someone should be looking out for you." "Why you?" Marcus smiled. "Because I'm nosy and I like to fix things? That's not a great quality in a doctor. It's an excellent quality in a friend." I went into labor at 38 weeks, alone in my apartment at 3 a.m. I called Marcus because he told me to call him day or night if anything happened. He met me at the hospital 20 minutes later, still in his sleep clothes, and stayed with me through the entire labor. 16 hours later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I named her Sophie, after my grandmother, not after anyone from my past life with Daniel. Marcus held her while the nurses cleaned me up, and when he looked at me, something in his expression had shifted. "She's perfect," he said softly. "Thank you for being here. There's nowhere else I'd want to be." That's when I realized I was falling for him. Not the desperate, trying to be enough love I'd felt for Daniel, but something real, something that felt like coming home. "Marcus," I started, but he interrupted. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you just gave birth and you're vulnerable and I'm your doctor, which is ethically complicated. But Elena, I need you to know, I'm falling for you. For you and Sophie both. And when you're ready, when enough time has passed that this isn't weird, I'd really like to take you on a date." I laughed through tears. "How much time do you think needs to pass before it stops being weird? 6 months? A year? However long you need. How about 2 months?" I suggested. "Once Sophie and I have figured out this whole being alive thing." Marcus smiled. 2 months is perfect. We dated slowly, carefully. Marcus respected my boundaries, my need to take things at my own pace. He fell in love with Sophie like she was his own daughter. He never asked about her biological father, never pressed me about my past. When Sophie was 6 months old, Marcus proposed. I know this is fast, he said. And I know there are things in your past you haven't told me. But Elena, I love you. I love Sophie. I want to build a life with you both. Will you marry me? I looked at him, kind, patient, genuinely in love with me for who I actually was, and I said yes. We got married in a small ceremony when Sophie was 1 year old. Marcus adopted her legally, becoming her father in every way that mattered. And for the first time in either of my lifetimes, I was genuinely happy. 3 years after leaving Daniel, I was living in Seattle, married to Marcus, raising Sophie, working as a senior manager at my company. Life was peaceful, fulfilling, complete. Then my phone rang. Elena. It was Daniel's voice, and I hadn't heard it in 3 years. I need to talk to you. How did you get this number? Your mother. Please don't hang up. It's important. Against my better judgment, I stayed on the line. What do you want, Daniel? I made a mistake. Celeste and we're getting divorced. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not calling for sympathy. I'm calling because I found something. In Celeste's things. Medical records. Elena, were you pregnant when you left me? My heart stopped. That's none of your business. You were, Daniel breathed. You were pregnant and you didn't tell me. Elena, do I have a child? No. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. You don't have a child. Sophie is not your daughter. Sophie? You named her Sophie? Elena, if you were pregnant when you left, then she has to be. She's not yours, Daniel. She's Marcus's daughter. My husband's daughter. Silence on the other end. You're married? Daniel finally asked. For 2 years. Happily married. To a man who actually loves me. But if you were pregnant? I lost the baby, I lied. 2 months after I left you. Miscarriage. I dealt with it alone and moved on. Elena, I'm so sorry. Don't be. It worked out the way it was supposed to. You got your white moonlight. I got my real life. Everyone's happy. I'm not happy. Celeste wasn't who I thought she was. She was manipulative, controlling, obsessed with my money. That's not my problem, Daniel. I know. But I need to see you. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. You loved her. You got her. It didn't work out. That's life. Elena, please. I hung up. Marcus found me sitting on our bedroom floor, crying. What happened? He asked, gathering me into his arms. Daniel called. He knows about Sophie. He thinks she's his. Is she? I looked up at him, seeing no judgment in his eyes, just concern and love. Biologically? Probably. But he's not her father. You are. Does he want a DNA test? I don't know. I told him she wasn't his. That I'd lost the baby and Sophie was yours. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Do you want to tell him the truth? No. He gave up any right to her when he chose Celeste over us. He doesn't get to walk back into our lives now that his fantasy fell apart. Okay, Marcus said simply. Then we don't tell him. What if he pushes for a test? What if he gets lawyers involved? Then we deal with it. But Elena, you're Sophie's mother. I'm her legal father through adoption. Daniel has no claim to her. We're safe. But I wasn't sure we were safe. Because Daniel could be persistent when he wanted something. And if he really believed Sophie was his, he wouldn't let it go. I was right. 2 weeks later, Daniel showed up in Seattle. He found our address somehow, probably paid an investigator, and knocked on our door on a Saturday morning. Marcus answered. Can I help you? I'm looking for Elena Martinez. Or I guess it's Elena-chan now. Who's asking? Daniel Walker. I'm her. He paused. I'm an old friend. Marcus's expression hardened. You're the ex-fiancé. Elena told you about me? She told me enough. What do you want? I need to talk to her. About her daughter. Our daughter, Marcus corrected. Sophie is my daughter. I have reason to believe she's mine. And I have legal adoption papers that say she's mine. You need to leave. Not until I see Elena. I appeared behind Marcus, Sophie on my hip. She was 3 now, with Daniel's dark hair and his brown eyes. Anyone looking at them side by side would see the resemblance. Daniel stared at Sophie like he'd been struck by lightning. "She looks exactly like my mother," he whispered. "She looks like a lot of people," I said. "That doesn't make her yours." "Elena, please. I just need to know." "You need to leave," Marcus interrupted. "Now. Or I'm calling the police. I have rights." "You have nothing," I said coldly. "You're not on her birth certificate. You have no legal connection to her. And even if you got a DNA test proving paternity, you'd still have to prove why you deserve any place in her life. Because I'm her father. You're a sperm donor at best. Marcus is her father. He was there when she was born. He changed her diapers, taught her to walk, comforted her when she was sick. He's earned the title. You haven't." Daniel looked stricken. "Elena, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But please don't punish me by keeping me from my daughter. This isn't punishment. This is protection. I'm protecting Sophie from a man who might decide she's not worth the trouble when the novelty wears off. From a man who might resent her for not being Celeste's child. From a man who doesn't actually want to be a father. He just doesn't want to admit he lost something else. That's not fair. You don't get to talk about fair. You were with your white moonlight while I was dying in that hospital bed, pregnant with this child, listening to you tell her you should have married her instead of me. Fair left the building a long time ago." Daniel went pale. "What hospital bed? What are you talking about?" I realized my mistake too late. I'd referenced my previous timeline, the one where I'd died. "Nothing. It doesn't matter. Just leave, Daniel." "No, you said something specific. Something about dying in a hospital bed." "Elena, what aren't you telling me?" "I'm not telling you anything. That's the point. My life, my daughter, my choices. None of it involves you." Marcus stepped between us. "She asked you to leave. I'm asking you one more time. After that, I'm calling the police for harassment and trespassing." Daniel looked at Sophie one more time, his face full of longing and regret, then turned and walked away. After he left, Marcus held me while I shook. "He knows," I whispered. "He knows she's his. Knowing and proving are different things. And even if he proves it, he has no rights. He wasn't there. We were. What if he doesn't let this go? Then we fight. But Elena, you're not alone this time. You have me. We'll face this together." Daniel didn't let it go. 2 months later, we received legal papers. Daniel was petitioning for a paternity test and, if confirmed, for partial custody of Sophie. "Can he do that?" I asked our lawyer. "He can petition," our lawyer explained. "But proving paternity doesn't automatically grant custody. The courts look at the best interests of the child. Sophie has lived her entire life with you and Marcus as her parents. Daniel would have to prove that having a relationship with him would benefit Sophie, and that's a high bar given he's been completely absent. But he could win? It's unlikely, but possible." The paternity test confirmed what we all knew. Daniel was Sophie's biological father. His DNA was a 99.9% match. The custody hearing was brutal. Daniel's lawyer painted me as vindictive, as someone who'd deliberately hidden a child from her father out of spite. They showed photos of Daniel looking successful and stable, talked about his family wealth and resources. Our lawyer countered with the timeline, how I'd left Daniel before knowing I was pregnant, how he'd moved on with Celeste immediately, how he'd never tried to contact me in 3 years until stumbling across medical records by accident. Mr. Walker didn't want to be a father, our lawyer argued. He wanted to ease his guilt about his failed marriage to the woman he chose over Ms. Chun. He's not seeking custody because he loves this child. He's seeking it because his ego can't handle that something of his exists in the world without his control. The judge listened to everything, then asked Daniel a single question. "Mr. Walker, if Miss Chun had told you about the pregnancy when she left you, what would you have done?" Daniel hesitated. I would have been there for her." "Would you have ended your relationship with Ms. Laurent, Celeste, to be with Miss Chun?" Longer hesitation. I don't know. It's hard to say what I would have done in a hypothetical." "It's not hypothetical for Miss Chun," the judge interrupted. She had to make that exact decision. She knew you'd chosen another woman. She had to decide whether to trap you in a relationship you didn't want or to raise her child alone. She chose her child's well-being over securing financial support from a reluctant father. The judge ruled in our favor. Daniel was granted no custody, no visitation. He was required to pay child support, which I immediately had placed in a trust fund for Sophie that he couldn't access or control. Outside the courthouse, Daniel caught up with me. "Elena, please. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just want to know my daughter." "She's not your daughter. Biologically, yes. But in every way that matters, she's Marcus's daughter. She calls him Daddy. She lights up when he comes home from work. She feels safe with him. You're a stranger to her. But I could be more." "No, you couldn't. Because you don't actually want to be her father. You want to ease your guilt. You want to prove to yourself that you're a good person. But being a parent isn't about you. It's about the child. And what Sophie needs is stability, consistency, and parents who are actually present. Not a biological father who shows up whenever his conscience bothers him." "I made mistakes. You made choices. There's a difference. You chose Celeste over me. You chose your fantasy over reality. And now you have to live with those choices. What about Sophie's choice? Doesn't she deserve to know her biological father? When she's 18, if she wants to meet you, I won't stop her. But until then, my job is to protect her from people who might hurt her. Even if one of those people is you." I walked away, and this time I truly meant it when I said goodbye. 5 years after the custody battle, I was 35 years old, watching Sophie play in our backyard with her little brother. Marcus and I had had another child, a boy we named Alex. Daniel had eventually moved back east, remarried someone more suitable, had 2 children of his own. He sent birthday cards to Sophie every year, which we saved for her but didn't make a big deal of. "Mom," Sophie called out. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Lily at school said her parents are divorced and she has 2 dads. Am I like that? Do I have another dad somewhere?" I'd known this question was coming eventually. Sophie was 8 now, old enough to understand some things, young enough that we could control the narrative. "You have one dad," I said firmly. "Daddy Marcus. He's the one who chose you, who's been there since you were born, who loves you completely. But there's someone else too, right? Someone whose DNA I have." "Yes. There was a man I knew before I met Daddy. Things didn't work out between us, and we went our separate ways before you were born. He knows about you now, and he's a nice person, but he's not your dad. He has his own family. Does he ever want to see me?" "He used to. But we explained that you already have a wonderful father, and you don't need confusion in your life. He understood." Sophie thought about this. "I'm glad you married Daddy instead." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." 10 years after leaving Daniel, I was 40 years old when I received news that Celeste had died. Suicide, the report said, though whispers suggested it might have been an overdose. Her art career had never recovered after her marriage to Daniel had fallen apart so publicly. She'd spent years trying to recapture her former glory and had destroyed herself in the process. I felt sad for her, not because I missed her or forgave her, but because she'd been as much a prisoner of Daniel's fantasy as I had. He'd put her on such a high pedestal that she could never have lived up to it. Daniel came to Seattle for her funeral, and he called me after. "I wanted you to know," he said, "about Celeste. I heard. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? You have every reason to hate her." "I don't hate her. I pity her. She was your white moonlight, the perfect woman who could never be real because perfect doesn't exist. You loved a fantasy version of her. And when the real her couldn't live up to it, you both suffered. Is that what happened? I destroyed both of you with my expectations." "You destroyed yourself," I corrected. "We just had the misfortune of being caught in the blast radius." "I think about Sophie sometimes," Daniel said quietly. "About what kind of father I could have been. You can still be one. You have 2 children with your wife. It's not the same. I'm present, but I'm not. I don't feel the same connection. Maybe because I never got over the guilt of losing Sophie. Sophie isn't lost. She's happy, healthy, loved. She has a good life. The guilt you feel isn't about her. It's about you. You feel guilty because you know you chose wrong. You picked a fantasy over reality, and by the time you realized your mistake, the reality had moved on. Did you ever love me? Daniel asked. Really love me? I loved who I thought you were. The man you pretended to be before Celeste came back into your life. But I don't think that man ever really existed. You were always just waiting for her. And now she's gone, and it's too late for all of us. It's not too late for you to be a good father to the children you have. To be a good husband to the woman who chose you. To stop living in the past and actually participate in your present. After that conversation, Daniel stopped sending birthday cards. Not out of malice but out of acceptance. He finally understood that Sophie wasn't his to claim. That his white moonlight had been a poison that had destroyed everything beautiful in his life. And that the only way forward was to let go. 15 years after leaving Daniel, I was 45 years old when Sophie started asking real questions about her biological father. I want to meet him, she said. She was 13 now, old enough to understand the complexities. Not because I think he's my dad is my dad, but because I want to know where I came from. Marcus and I exchanged glances. If that's what you really want, we can arrange it, I said. But Sophie, you need to understand, he's essentially a stranger. He might not be who you imagine. I know, but I still want to try. We arranged a meeting at a neutral location. A park with Marcus and me present. Daniel came alone, looking older than his 45 years, nervous and uncertain. Sophie, he said, his voice breaking. You're so grown up. Hi, Sophie said, polite but reserved. Thanks for meeting me. They talked for an hour. Daniel told her about his family, his work, his interests. Sophie told him about school, her friends, her love of soccer and art. It was cordial, pleasant, superficial. At the end, Sophie hugged him briefly and said, "Thank you for meeting me. I think I needed to see that you're just a person, not some mystery." After he left, Sophie turned to us. "I'm glad I met him. But he's not my dad. He's just the guy whose DNA I share." "Dad is my dad." "Are you sure?" Marcus asked gently. "Completely. He seems nice, but we don't have a connection. Not like I have with you." Marcus hugged her tight, and I saw tears in his eyes. Over the next few years, Sophie and Daniel exchanged occasional emails, had lunch once or twice a year. It was friendly but distant, exactly what it should have been. 20 years after leaving Daniel, I was 50 years old, watching Sophie graduate from high school. She'd been accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship. She was brilliant, confident, kind. Everything I'd hoped she'd become. Daniel came to the graduation, sitting in the back with his wife and children. Afterwards, he approached us. "Congratulations, Sophie. You've become an amazing young woman." "Thanks. I appreciate you coming." "Elena," Daniel said, turning to me. "Marcus. Thank you. For giving her the life I couldn't have given her. For being the parents she needed." "You're welcome," Marcus said graciously. After Daniel left, I felt a sense of closure I'd never expected. The man who'd once been the center of my universe was now just a footnote in my daughter's story. Present but not essential, acknowledged but not yearned for. 25 years after leaving Daniel, I was 55 years old when he died. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. He was 55, same as me, but stress and guilt had aged him prematurely. Sophie cried when she heard the news, not devastated, but sad for the relationship they'd never quite had. "I wish I'd known him better," she said. He wished that too, I told her. But some things aren't meant to be. He made his choices, and they led him to a different life than the one he might have had with us. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed with him? I thought about my two timelines, the one where I died trying to be enough for him, and the one where I'd chosen myself and built something real. "I don't wonder," I said. "I know. I would have been miserable. You might never have been born, or you would have grown up watching your father pine for another woman while your mother slowly died inside. What we have now, this family, this life, this love, it's only possible because I walked away. Then I'm glad you left him. So am I, sweetheart. So am I." 30 years after leaving Daniel, I was 60 years old, retiring from my company after a successful career. Marcus and I were planning to travel, to spend time with our grandchildren. Sophie had married and had 2 children of her own. At my retirement party, someone asked me what I was most proud of. Choosing myself, I said without hesitation. 35 years ago, I walked away from a man who didn't love me, from a life that would have killed me slowly. I chose uncertainty over unhappiness. And it led me to everything I have now. That's brave, someone said. It's necessary, I corrected. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you deserve better and walk away before it's too late. 40 years after leaving Daniel, I was 70 years old, sitting in my garden with Marcus, watching the sunset. Do you have any regrets? Marcus asked. About what? About not telling Daniel about Sophie earlier. About letting him miss so much of her life. I thought about it carefully. No. Because telling him would have trapped us all in a relationship built on obligation instead of love. Sophie had a childhood filled with joy and security. She had parents who chose her, who wanted her, who were present for every moment. If Daniel had been involved from the beginning, none of that would have been possible. You're sure? Completely. He got to chase his white moonlight. I got to build a real life. Sophie got to grow up loved and secure. Everyone ended up where they were supposed to be. Even Daniel? Especially Daniel. He finally learned that fantasies can't sustain you. That the woman on the pedestal isn't real. And the real woman can never compete with the fantasy. It was a hard lesson, but he needed to learn it. 5 years later, I was 75 when I died peacefully in my sleep, surrounded by Marcus, Sophie, Alex, and all my grandchildren. At my funeral, Sophie gave the eulogy. My mother once told me that the bravest thing she ever did was walk away from a man who didn't love her. She was 25, pregnant, alone, and terrified. But she chose herself anyway. She chose me anyway. And that choice led to everything beautiful in our lives. She married a man who actually loved her. My dad, who's been the best father anyone could ask for. She built a career she was proud of. She raised 2 children who adored her. She created a life filled with genuine love and joy. But most importantly, she taught me that you don't have to settle. That you don't have to be someone's second choice. That walking away from something that's hurting you isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. My biological father used to call my mother his consolation prize. But she wasn't anyone's consolation. She was the grand prize and she knew it. She just had to walk away from people who couldn't see her value to find people who could. Mom, thank you for being brave enough to leave. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for showing me that real love doesn't make you smaller. It helps you become everything you were meant to be. You lived a beautiful life because you had the courage to walk away from an ugly situation. And we're all better for it. After my death, Sophie found a letter I'd left for her, to be opened only after I was gone. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But before I go, I want you to know the complete truth about your father, both of them. Daniel Walker was your biological father. I loved him once or thought I did. But he was in love with someone else, his white moonlight. A woman he'd put on such a high pedestal that no real person could compete. In another life, I died trying to be enough for him. I died pregnant with you, listening to him tell his white moonlight that he should have married her instead of me. I died alone, unloved, a footnote in his story. But somehow, impossibly, I was given a second chance. I woke up 6 months before my wedding to him. And this time I knew the truth. So I walked away. I didn't tell him about the pregnancy because I knew what would happen. He would have felt obligated to stay, resented me for trapping him, and you would have grown up watching your father long for another woman while tolerating us out of duty. That's not love. That's a prison. Instead, I moved to Seattle. I met Marcus, your real father, the man who chose us every single day. The man who was there when you were born, who taught you to ride a bike, who stayed up with you during every illness, who cried at your graduations. Daniel was a sperm donor. Marcus was your father. I don't regret keeping the secret. I don't regret building a life without Daniel. I don't regret any of it because look at what we created. A family built on genuine love, not obligation. You met Daniel eventually and you saw him for what he was. A decent man who made poor choices and had to live with the consequences. You didn't miss anything by not having him as a father. You had everything you needed with Marcus. I'm telling you all this now so you understand. When something isn't right, when someone doesn't choose you fully and completely, you don't have to stay. You don't have to try harder. You don't have to make yourself smaller or different or better. You just have to walk away and build something real with someone who sees your value. Daniel spent his life chasing a fantasy. I spent mine building a reality. His fantasy destroyed him. My reality saved me. Choose wisely, my darling daughter. Choose yourself. Choose real love over fantasy. Choose people who choose you back. I love you forever, Mom. Sophie read the letter 3 times, crying through each reading. Then she tucked it carefully into her mother's journal and placed it in the family archive. That evening, she called her father Marcus, the only father who mattered. Did you know, she asked, about Mom dying in another life? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. She told me pieces over the years. About feeling like she'd lived through everything before. About knowing exactly how it would end if she stayed with Daniel. I didn't understand it fully, but I believed her. She saved herself by leaving him. She saved all of us. You, me, the life we built together. Your mother was the bravest person I ever met. I wish I could thank her. You did every day. By living a beautiful life. By being happy and loved. That was the thank you she needed. 10 years after Elena's death, Sophie was 45 years old, successful in her own career as a child psychologist, married to a man who loved her completely, raising her own children with the same fierce protectiveness her mother had shown. One day, she received a letter from Daniel's widow. He had died 5 years earlier, and his wife had been going through his papers. I found these, the letter said. Letters he wrote to your mother but never sent. I thought you should have them. Sophie opened the first letter, dated 20 years earlier. Dear Elena, I see Sophie's college graduation announcement in the alumni newsletter. Stanford. Full scholarship. I'm so proud even though I have no right to be. I think about the life I could have had with you both. About being the father who taught her to ride a bike, who helped with homework, who walked her down the aisle someday. Instead, I'm a stranger who gets occasional emails and awkward yearly lunches. Celeste used to ask me why I stayed so fixated on you and Sophie. She said I should focus on the family we had together. But the truth is, I was never fully present with her either. I was too busy mourning what I'd lost. You were right about everything. I chose a fantasy over reality. I chose the woman on the pedestal over the woman who actually loved me. And by the time I realized my mistake, you'd built something beautiful without me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I threw away. Daniel. Another letter dated 10 years earlier. Elena. I met Marcus today. Saw him with Sophie at her wedding. The way he looked at her like she hung the moon. The way she looked at him with complete trust and love. That should have been me. But I forfeited that right when I chose Celeste over you. Marcus is a good man. Better than me. Sophie got the father she deserved, and you got the husband you deserved. I'm glad, even though it kills me. I spent so much time chasing the perfect woman that I never noticed the real woman who was standing right in front of me. Celeste wasn't my white moonlight. You were. I was just too stupid to see it until it was too late. Daniel. A final letter, dated shortly before his death. Elena. I heard you retired. I hope you're happy that you're spending time with your family, traveling, enjoying the life you built. I'm dying. Cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I'm not writing to ask for sympathy or forgiveness. I'm writing because I want you to know something I should have said 40 years ago. You were never my consolation prize. I was yours. You settled for a man who didn't appreciate you, who took you for granted, who was so obsessed with a fantasy that he couldn't see the miracle standing in front of him. You deserved better. You found better. I'm glad. In another life, if such things exist, I hope I'm smart enough to choose you first. To value you properly. To be the man you needed instead of the fool I was. Thank you for Sophie. Thank you for not letting my inadequacy define her life. Thank you for being the kind of person who could walk away from something broken and build something beautiful. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too blind to see it. I hope your life has been as happy as mine was empty. Daniel. Sophie showed the letters to her father. Should I have shown these to Mom before she died? She asked. Marcus shook his head. Your mother didn't need Daniel's regret or apologies. She'd made her peace long before he did. These letters would have just been burdens she didn't need to carry. He finally understood what he lost. But it was too late. That's the point, Sophie. When you choose wrong, when you chase fantasies instead of valuing what's real, sometimes you don't get a second chance. Daniel got his lesson. Your mother got her life. That's how it was meant to be. Sophie burned the letters after reading them once more. Her mother's story didn't need Daniel's postscript. It was complete without his regret, whole without his redemption, perfect without his apology. 20 years after Elena's death, Sophie was 60 years old, writing her own mother's biography, a project her children had encouraged. She titled it, "The Woman Who Walked Away: How My Mother Saved Us All by Choosing Herself." In the introduction she wrote, "My mother died twice. Once at 30, in a hospital bed, betrayed and alone, listening to the man she loved tell another woman that he'd made a mistake marrying her. And once at 75 in her sleep, surrounded by everyone who had genuinely loved her. The difference between those two deaths was a single choice: the courage to walk away. In her first life, my mother tried to be enough for a man who was chasing a fantasy. She died trying and she died failing because you can't compete with someone's imagination. In her second life, my mother chose herself. She walked away from a man who didn't value her. She built a life that fulfilled her. She loved people who loved her back. She created a family based on genuine affection instead of obligation. And she taught me the most important lesson anyone can learn. You don't have to stay where you're not chosen. You don't have to fight for someone who won't fight for you. You don't have to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's fantasy. You can just walk away. And on the other side of that walk, you might find everything you were always meant to have." My biological father spent his life mourning what he'd lost. My real father spent his life celebrating what he'd found. My mother spent her second chance at life building something beautiful. That's the power of choosing yourself. That's the grace of walking away. That's the miracle of recognizing that some people are meant to be lessons, not lifetimes. My mother's white moonlight wasn't the fantasy woman my biological father was chasing. My mother's white moonlight was herself. The woman she became when she stopped trying to be enough for someone else and started being everything for herself. This is her story. This is our story. This is the story of what happens when you're brave enough to leave. The book became a bestseller, resonating with millions of women who had stayed too long, tried too hard, made themselves too small for people who would never appreciate them. Sophie received thousands of letters from readers. "Your mother's story gave me the courage to leave my emotionally abusive husband. I was engaged to a man who was clearly in love with someone else. After reading your book, I called it off. Thank you. I've been trying to earn my partner's love for 10 years. Your mother taught me that real love doesn't need to be earned." At book signings, Sophie would often be asked, "Do you think your mother ever regretted leaving your biological father?" And Sophie would always answer the same way. Not once. Not ever. She regretted the 5 years she'd spent trying to be enough for him in another timeline. But she never regretted walking away and building a real life. That's the difference between regret and wisdom. Regret is wishing you'd done differently. Wisdom is knowing you did exactly what needed to be done. 30 years after Elena's death, Sophie herself was 75 years old, the same age her mother had been when she died. She was surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Her own husband had passed away 5 years earlier, and she'd grieved him deeply, a grief that proved she'd found the kind of love her mother had taught her to look for. On the anniversary of her mother's death, Sophie visited the grave. Marcus was buried beside Elena, their headstones touching. On Elena's stone were the words, "She chose love over fantasy, herself over settling, reality over dreams. And she built something beautiful." Sophie placed flowers between the headstones and spoke out loud, "Mom, I'm the age you were when you died. I've lived the life you gave me by walking away. I've loved and been loved. I've raised children who know their worth. I've built something that will outlast me. All because you were brave enough to leave a man who didn't deserve you and find a man who did. All because you chose yourself when everyone expected you to stay. All because you understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Thank you, Mom, for everything. But especially for teaching me that I never have to settle for being someone's second choice. That I never have to compete with a fantasy. That I always deserve to be someone's first, last, and only choice. You were Dad's white moonlight, the real kind, the kind built on actual love and genuine partnership. Not the fantasy kind that destroys everything it touches. Daniel spent his life chasing a mirage. You spent your second life building an oasis. He died empty. You died full. That's the difference between fantasy and reality, between chasing and choosing, between a white moonlight and real love. Rest well, Mom. Your story continues in all of us who learned from your courage. Sophie stood up, brushed off her knees, and walked away from the cemetery toward her car where her daughter was waiting. You okay, Mom? Her daughter asked. Yeah, Sophie said, smiling through tears. I'm perfect. Just remembering that Grandma saved us all by being brave enough to walk away. From Grandpa Daniel? From the wrong life. Toward the right one. As they drove away, Sophie thought about the two timelines her mother had lived. One where she'd stayed and died unloved, and one where she'd left and lived fully. The difference between those timelines was a single moment of courage. A single choice to value herself more than she valued being chosen by someone who didn't value her. That choice had rippled forward through decades, creating lives that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Sophie, her siblings, her children, her grandchildren. An entire family tree that only existed because one woman had been brave enough to walk away. Elena Martinezjan had died twice. But only in one of those lives had she truly lived. And that made all the difference. Epilogue. 50 years after Elena's death, Sophie's great-granddaughter Emma, named after Elena, was researching her family history for a school project when she found her great-great-grandmother's original letter to Sophie. She read it with wide eyes, then ran to find her grandmother. Grandma Sophie, did great-great-grandma Elena really die and come back to life? Sophie, now 95 years old but still sharp, smiled. She believed she did. Whether it was literal rebirth or just extraordinary intuition, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that she knew exactly what would happen if she stayed. And she was brave enough to leave. What happened to the man she left? The one who didn't love her. He spent his life chasing a fantasy and ended up with nothing. He died alone, full of regret, having wasted his entire life on something that was never real. And great-great-grandma? She built a real life with real love. She was happy, Emma. Genuinely, deeply happy. Because she understood something most people never learn. You can't make someone love you. You can't compete with their fantasy. You can only walk away and find someone who sees your reality as better than any fantasy. Is that why you're still single, Grandma? After Grandpa died? Because you won't settle. Sophie smiled. Exactly. Your great-great-grandmother taught me that being alone is better than being lonely in a relationship. That choosing yourself is always the right choice. That you should never, ever settle for being someone's second choice. What if I'm scared to walk away from something? Then remember this story. Remember that your great-great-grandmother died in one timeline trying to be enough for someone who would never value her. And in another timeline she walked away and built something beautiful. Fear is natural. But regret is worse than fear. Emma hugged her great-grandmother tight. Tell me more about her. About the woman who was brave enough to walk away. And Sophie did. She told the story of Elena Martinezjan, the woman who died twice and lived once, the woman who chose herself when everyone expected her to settle, the woman whose single act of courage had rippled forward to create an entire family of people who knew their worth. She gave her husband to his white moonlight, Sophie concluded. And by the time he discovered the child wasn't his and that she was long gone, she'd built something so beautiful that his regret meant nothing. She'd won by refusing to play the game. That's the best kind of revenge, Emma said. It's not revenge, Sophie corrected. It's justice. Revenge is hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is building a beautiful life despite how they hurt you. Your great-great-grandmother didn't need revenge. She just needed to be free. And she was. Completely. Utterly. Beautifully free. I want to be like her when I grow up. Then remember this. Walk away from anyone who makes you feel like you have to earn their love. Walk toward people who choose you without hesitation. Build your life on reality, not fantasy. And never, ever settle for being someone's consolation prize. I won't, Grandma. I promise. And Sophie knew that Elena's legacy would continue. Not because of dramatic revenge or devastating revelations, but because of one simple truth that had been passed down through 4 generations. You always have the right to walk away. You always deserve to be chosen first. And you never, ever have to settle for being someone's white moonlight when you can be someone's real love. Elena Martinez had learned this lesson the hard way. Through death and rebirth, through pain and courage. But she'd learned it. And in learning it, she'd saved not just herself, but everyone who came after her. That was her legacy. Not the man she left, or the child whose paternity was complicated, or the dramatic revelations that came later. Her legacy was teaching her daughter, her granddaughter, her great-granddaughter, and every woman who heard her story the same simple truth. Walk away. Choose yourself. Build something real. Everything else will follow.